Well, we're back again with yet another No Fluff analysis, and this time I'm going to be talking about the Scars of the Syndicate Part 1 Summon Showcase, from the 2nd of April until the 13th of April UTC. Let's get straight to it with the first unit added with the showcase, the 5-star Shadow Dagger, Bellina, the Spitfire Renegade. Again, we see a new unit with a new mechanic, so let's break it down step by step with the basic functions of her skills first. Bellina's first skill is Renegade Descent, dealing 1 hit of damage to a target and nearby enemies, with damage scaling up as Bellina's hit points decrease. Her second skill is Renegade Gambit, filling 30% of her Dragon Drive gauge. If Bellina has 30% hit points or more, she drops to 30% hit points and gains additional gauge relative to the lost hit points. She has the critical rate co-ability, as with all daggers, and her chain co-ability grants shadow units slight resist when their hit points are 40% or below. So, let's get to her abilities. Her first ability is Renegade Queen. Bellina's shapeshift gauge is replaced with a Dragon Drive gauge. Activating the Dragon Drive gauge increases her damage by 35% and defense by 75%. Her attack chains and force strike change, and deal more damage when she has lower hit points. Her skills also activate a different variant when Dragon Drive is active. Renegade Descent, her first skill, becomes Renegade Dragonfall, targeting multiple nearby enemies and also dispelling buffs. Using Renegade Dragonfall consumes 25% of Bellina's Dragon Drive gauge, but refills the skill gauge after use. Renegade Gambit, her second skill, becomes Renegade Shadow Blaze, completely consuming the Dragon Drive gauge in exchange for dealing a single, massive hit that scales up with lower hit points. Bellina also has Blindness Resist, and increased strength and attack rate at 30% hit points or below. So from all the content that I've seen on Reddit, basically, Bellina is another monstrous addition to the Shadow unit pool. With the right conditions, she can infinitely spam her first skill with Dragon Drive active, melting Kaiyan even faster than he already does when he's broken. Bellina will likely be joining Gala Alex and Gala Cleo at the top of the Shadow roster, but to be fair, the Shadow roster is broken enough already. Another powerful unit probably won't change things too much. Elsewhere in the showcase we have the 5-star Shadow Dragon, Andromeda, the Liberated Aid. She grants shadow units 40% strength, and when their hit points are at 30% or below, they also gain an additional 40% strength and 100% defense, halving the damage taken. Her skill is Unblessed Bonds, dealing damage to a target and nearby enemies and buffing the team's defense by 30% for 15 seconds. At first glance, Andromeda is a strong defensive option for adventurers such as Bellina, Natalie, Veronica, as well as Aldred, the new welfare unit. She'll work well to help you stay alive and take hits while at reduced hit points. While she's unlikely to convincingly beat Shinobi in terms of overall damage, she's a fine option for players that haven't perfectly memorized fights, and in instances where there's unavoidable damage for our low HP loving adventurers, the extra defense can help them to stay alive. Okay, well that's actually it in terms of the Adventurer and Dragon added with the showcase. So let's also go over the Adventurer and Dragon added with the latest raid event, Scars of the Syndicate. The raid event sees us with the new 4-star Welfare Shadow Blade, Aldred, the Wormbound Warrior. Aldred, much like Bellina, has a tiny bit of complexity to his kit, so let's also build it up layer by layer. Aldred's first skill is Wormbound Ruiner, dealing damage to enemies ahead. His second skill is Fetters of Fear, which fills 40% of Aldred's Dragon Drive gauge. If Aldred is above 30% hit points, he falls to 30% hit points and gains additional Dragon Drive gauge relative to the amount of hit points lost. Being a blade unit, Aldred has the strength co-ability, and he also has the same chain co-ability as Bellina, granting shadow units light resist when their hit points are at 40% or below. In terms of his abilities, his first ability is Wormbound. As with Bellina, Aldred's shapeshift gauge is replaced with Dragon Drive, but base Aldred gets slightly lower bonuses, only plus 30% strength and 50% defense. Aldred's skills also change variants when Dragon Drive is active. Wormbound Ruiner becomes Wormbound Eternity, dealing extra damage with reduced hit points. This consumes 25% Dragon Drive gauge on use, but refills the skill gauge by 50%. Fetters of Fear becomes Unfettered Ferocity, completely filling the Dragon Drive gauge and granting Aldred the Loathsome Power buff for 40 seconds. Loathsome Power increases Aldred's strength by 30%, but deals self-damage equal to 6% of Aldred's maximum hit points every 2.9 seconds. Aldred also has maximum 50% blindness resist, and his third ability is the Beast Within, meaning that Loathsome Power will grant yet another 20% strength and increases defense by an additional 50%, bringing the bonuses more on par with Bellina, but since it's his third ability it requires a bit more investment. So Aldred is actually looking to be an interesting welfare character. He introduced the new Dragon Drive mechanic and doesn't immediately seem bad either. It'll be interesting to see where he lands on the DPS simulation charts once his frame data and mechanics are analysed and plugged into simulations. However, it's probably quite unlikely for him to be, become a fully meta character, but hey, if you think you like him, and, well, also actually, considering that getting Gala Cleo, Gala Alex, and or Bellina is fairly difficult at the moment, like, who knows, if you don't have any of those characters, then Aldred is probably a good budget alternative. Anyway, moving on, we also have a 5-star welfare shadow dragon, Barbatos? The Worm-Browned Dragon. He grants shadow units a baseline plus 20% strength, and an additional 40% strength when hit points are at 30% or below. His skill is Ground Shaker, dealing damage to enemies directly ahead. So he's a welfare dragon with bonuses that aren't inherently bad. Barbatos? Seems to be, a decent budget option for Aldred, Bellina, Veronica, and Natalie. I suppose there's not really much else to be said about him, so let's move on to the Wyrmprints also added with the showcase. The 5-star print added with the showcase is the Synthetic Dragon, granting Last Recovery and Resilient Offense. So Resilient Offense is finally on a print that doesn't have a secondary bonus that is bow specific. I think this print might see a lot of use in longer fights due to the strength buff eventually stacking to 30% with the right conditions. And if you really manipulate, like, Aldred and Bellina, I think you could stack it to 30% really quickly. And then the Last Recovery buff actually might help you do that even faster. And it's relevant to more adventurers compared to the Dear Diary print, granting, the bow bonus. The 4-star print added with the showcase is a Widow's Lament, granting Last Defense and Healing double buff. So this is an odd print that'll grant you regen when your hit points fall to 30%, and then more regen with additional defense buffs. I'm not sure how many fights would specifically want the last defense buff though. Maybe a fight with 2 instances of damage close together. First thing that comes to mind for me is High Midgard's Armor with the stack and then the split purple damage. Who knows. Anyway, that's kind of it. In terms of old content, there is literally no old content that's rated up on these Scars of the Syndicate showcase. It's only Andromeda and Bellina who both have the 0.5% base rate. So yeah, as for my overall opinion, I don't know, Bellina seems really powerful. If you missed out on Gala Alex and Gala Cleo, then Bellina's your current chance at actually getting an incredibly strong shadow unit. However, for me, well, there's part 2 for the showcase coming along, and there's also the Fire Emblem Heroes rerun, as well as the part 2 showcase for that, introducing new limited characters. So personally, I'm going to hold on for that. I might end up getting Bellina somewhere down the line. I'm not too particularly fussed. I have Gala Cleo. Yeah, I mean, if you don't have any of the really powerful shadow units at the moment, it seems like a lot of fights are actually gearing towards just blowing up light bosses like High Jupiter and Cayenne. So yeah, previous units like Nefaria, Patia, Lathna are actually probably seeing less use now. Things are more tailored towards Gala Alex, Cleo, and probably now Bellina as well. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Take it easy, stay safe, and I wish you luck in your upcoming pulls.